Salutations, pups! Welcome to Chapter 6 of The One They Call Broccoli by Texiliaz. As always, the link to the fic will be in the description below. And with that out of the way, let's jump on into it. Chapter 6 Falling to Pieces. Summary: Shota wonders how he can make things right with his students. Trying to make things right only leads to things getting worse. Now the question is, how do they fix this? Also, his cats still hate him, and it's driving the poor man insane. Notes: Hello, everyone! First off, I'm really sorry that updates have slowed down. College is really stressful right now. I want to thank everyone for your patience and support. You're all so very kind. I'm kind of nervous about this chapter since it's a bit heavier than the other ones, and also has graphic descriptions of both anxiety attacks and dissociation, which is something I am personally am dealing a lot with. I was recently diagnosed with DID, dissociative identity disorder, and even though Izuku dissociates in this story, I am not claiming Izuku to have it here, since it's a very complex diagnosis and I am still learning about it myself. I will put a timestamp at the start of the panic attack and the end of it, so if you don't want to read it or find it triggering, you can skip that small part. Anyway, hope you like this chapter. Trigger warning: panic attacks, dissociation, mentions of Nezu's lessons, but not anything graphic. I want to take a side note to make it clear that I, the person reading this, do not have DID. Okay. Shota's point of view. A few days had passed since they visited UA, and not much had changed. Shota had talked to Nezu a couple of times, trying to make him reconsider or at least wait with the lessons for Midoriya. But there was no changing the rat's mind. Whatever the kid had done, it had left a big enough impression on Nezu that the mammal was determined to have him as his student. Toshi wouldn't stop apologizing to him either, and as mad as Shota had been when he found out he had left Midoriya with Nezu, he also couldn't find the energy to stay mad at him. After all, Nezu is a longtime friend of Toshi, and Shota, though he'd never admit that. And Shota knows he is kind of at fault here for never fully explaining why he didn't want the rat to meet Midoriya. Toshi couldn't have known. On the other hand, Midoriya apparently had no trouble staying mad at Shota. But despite the kid's current distaste of him, Shota still joined Midoriya's training throughout the week, and today was no exception. The air was tense, but the kid at least tried to act civil with him, but never more than that. Midoriya would simply go through with his training, thank his teacher, and then walk over to All Might, who he had no problem being friendly with. His partner always looked very uncomfortable at the change of tone, and even tried to encourage Midoriya to act friendlier with Shota, which obviously did not work. Shota sighed when yet another lesson ended with the kid hastily walking away after giving a short bow and a "thank you, sensei." As much as it annoyed Shota, he also couldn't blame the brat for being upset. He is a teenager after all, and Shota knows that if someone unrelated to him tried to tell him who he could and could not meet with when he was that age, well, needless to say, he would be pretty damn pissed too. But still, it hurt how the kid just cut him off like this. Shota would actually prefer yelling or punching or literally anything else, because then at least Shota would have a reason to correct that behavior. The fact that Izuku was this mad and still acted polite around him was frustrating. And then, of course, there was the two cat brats at home, too. For some reason, both Slushy and Broccoli were mad at him, and Shota had no idea what he did wrong. They wouldn't let him come near them without Broccoli glaring at him or Slushy hissing at him, something she had never done before. And when Broccoli wasn't glaring or outright ignoring him, he was just being an overall brat. More than once, the minute he looked away, Shota would find his things having been pushed off the table. Keys would constantly go missing, and he had just barely managed to save his cup of coffee from being swatted away from the counter this morning. It didn't seem like any amount of timeout worked. Immediately after being let out, Broccoli was right back at it, like he simply couldn't help himself and had made it his mission to make life harder for the man. Shoda has tried thinking back on what could have made them both, especially Broccoli, this mad at him, but he came up with a blank every time. It didn't make sense. He'd even Googled cat teenage phase, for God's sake, but that, too, didn't quite feel right. They had gotten Broccoli over 2 years ago. Even if he would have been a newborn kitten at the time, he would be old enough that he would have already grown out of that phase by now. The idea that he would enter his teenage phase now just didn't make any sense. So there had to be another reason for that he was so angry. And so far, the only logical explanation was the one Toshi came up with. Perhaps Broccoli picked up on his conversation with the Nezu and, not liking Shoto bad-mouthing his friend, this was his way of protesting? But then, how do Shoto fix it? Would an apology help? Did Shota have to apologize to his goddamn cat? Shota buried his hands in his head and groaned. Shota buried his head into his hands and groaned, feeling a headache building up. And what the hell is he supposed to do with the other human brat? Tomorrow was Sunday, and he just knew Izuku would go to meet the damn rat, whether Shota liked it or not. Are you doing okay? Toshi asked, sitting down next to him where he was plopped down on one of the freezers. Shota gave a deep sigh in response and lowered his hands. He looked over at his partner with tired eyes. Never been better, he answered sarcastically. I'm guessing it's about young Midoriya? Shota just hummed in response, eyes traveling over to where the kid was, heaving heavy objects onto the truck. You could try talking to him again, Toshi suggested, but Shota just gave a humorless snort at that. Oh, yes, because look how well that went the first time, he muttered. There was a pause, Toshi seemingly considering something. I mean, I don't know much about these, lessons, he started slowly, but maybe Nezu has gotten better, and I'm sure if you explained to young Midoriya that you are simply worried about him, he would understand. At that, Shota let out a deep sigh. Toshi, I love you. You know that. But there's no way the kid will listen to anything I say at this point. He's gonna go and he's gonna have to learn it the hard way, and there's nothing either of us can do about it, he muttered, running a hand through his hair and refusing to look at his partner. Toshi gave his shoulders a firm squeeze before he stood up. I still think you should talk to him. If not for his sake, then for yours. Say what you feel you need to say, and then know you did all you could to stop him. And with that, Toshi walked back to coach Midoriya, leaving Shota with his thoughts. Sunday morning rolled around, and it was freezing outside. It was winter now, after all, and their breaths were clearly visible with every breath they took. Even so, Midoriya diligently showed up to training, though the kid was clearly distracted. Midoriya seemed even more skittish than usual and wouldn't meet Shota's eyes, which promptly ended with the boy being caught off guard and thrown to the ground more often than he'd been in months. After what must have been the fifth defeat in the last couple of minutes, Shota decided to call it quits. Okay, that's enough for today, he said, putting a hand up. At that, Midoriya frowned. What? Why? I can keep going, the kid said, keeping his stance. Shota had to suppress the urge to sigh. No, you're clearly distracted right now, and there's no use going like this, he explained. The kid looked ready to argue, but Shota cut him off as he continued. Also, I'd like to talk to you for a moment. Midoriya clicked his mouth shut and looked up at Shota, squinting his eyes at him. Okay. About what? He asked, already sounding defensive. This time, Shota did sigh, and he gestured for them to sit down on the back of the nearby truck. Midoriya hesitantly followed him and sat down, keeping a clear distance between them. I know you are planning to go to Nezu today, Shota started. Almost as soon as he said that, he could see all of Midoriya's defenses getting turned up high. The kid sat straighter and hardened his stare, looking ready to argue, but Shota wouldn't let him. Let me speak. I know it won't matter what I tell you, Because, let's be honest, it shouldn't be any of my business. And it isn't. But the thing is, I'm worried about you. So I'm just gonna tell you why I'm worried, and why I think you should wait with Nezu's classes. And then what you do with that information is entirely up to you. Sounds fair? Midoriya looked a bit surprised by this and just nodded, his shoulders dropping just a tiny fraction. Shoda took a deep breath, bracing himself. Okay, so the thing about Nezu, he doesn't sugarcoat things. At all. He wants you to be prepared for the worst. And only the worst. Because if the worst comes to shove and you aren't prepared to it, it can be fatal. And while, yes, that is true, in fact, this is what has saved me and many lives during my time as an underground hero. But the thing is, that kind of thinking, all the time, especially at such a young age, it, well, it messes you up, kiddo. Shota glanced at Midoriya, surprised when he saw the kid actually looking at him. Not angry or hostile, just watching, curious. He took a deep breath and continued, letting his gaze wander to the ocean. Look, it's not that Nezu is a bad teacher. He just has a tendency of taking things too far. For example, if he wants you to get better at analyzing, he'll have you analyze cases based on real events down to the very last horrifying detail. The pictures and stories for those cases are not pretty. He gritted out, feeling bile rise in his throat. When he started teaching me, I was 17 and a second year student at UA. I already had some experience out on the field, and I still suffered through nightmares over things Nezu had me review during his lessons. So to summarize, did those lessons help me as a pro? Yes. But do I want him to teach those same lessons to someone who's just 15? Absolutely not. His hands clenched where he had folded them in front of him, and he took another deep breath, willing himself to calm down. I want you to be able to enjoy this time you have before he gets his paws on you. Because after he starts teaching you, there's no going back. Do you understand? He hadn't planned for that long speech, and judging by the wide eyed stare he got from Midoriya, the boy hadn't either. And the kid looked at him like he had actually listened, which was honestly not something Shota had expected. He had expected eye rolls, interruptions, or snarky replies. But instead, all he was met with was shocked silence. Just when Shota started to wonder if Midoriya would say anything, the boy turned away and stared down at his lap. His whole frame was trembling as he wrung his hands through the material of his tracksuit. I I know what you were trying to say, but still, he stammered, trailing off and ducking his head. You still want to try? Shota sighed, having expected that. Midoriya nodded, not meeting Shota's eyes. Well, I tried, Shota thought, pushing down his disappointment and instead turning his focus to Midoriya, knowing there was no stopping this. He at least needed Midoriya to know he could fall back on him. He needed the boy to trust him again. I understand. And well, if you need anyone to talk to, then you know where to find me. All Might and I are both here for you, he said gently. And if you ever don't want to take those lessons or need a break, just tell Nezu and he will understand. But if he doesn't, then you come to me and I will talk to him. The rat may be a sadistic bastard, but he does care about his students. Right, Midoriya said, voice cracking and his shoulders trembling an awful lot. It sounded like he was trying not to cry. Shota was just about to comfort him, a hand reaching out to lay it on one of the kid's shoulders, when Midoriya suddenly stood up with a quick, Excuse me, and hastily ran off. He ran straight past a very confused Toshi and didn't even stop to greet him. Toshi called out a concerned, Young Midoriya! But he didn't get a response, and then, just like that, the kid was gone. His partner turned to stare at him, looking completely lost. Shota stared back, one hand still raised in the air from when he tried to lay it on Midoriya's shoulder. What happened? Toshi asked, walking up to him and glaring back at where Midoriya had run off to. Shota just shook his head. I'm not completely sure. I think he might need to be alone for a while, he sighed, clenching his fists in frustration. Let's just give him some space. Start of the panic attack and dissociation. Skip ahead if you don't want the details. I can't tell you a timestamp because I don't know ahead of time how long it's going to take me to read this. But I think it is safe to say we're in Izuku's point of view right now. I messed up. Shit, I really messed up. Izuku sobbed harder, curling into himself where he hid amongst the trash, arms hugging his knees tightly against his chest and nails digging into his arms. He'd been so mean to Shota lately, in both forms. He's been acting selfish to the man, his mentor, his dad, when all Shota ever did was care for him. I don't deserve them, neither as my dads or my mentors. The guilt was eating him alive, panic threatening to drown him. Why had he acted like this? Shota deserved so much better than just some stupid cat brat plaguing his life. I thought Shota was just being mean, but he had just been worried. Well, he shouldn't be worried. None of them should worry about me. Izuku felt so awful, like the scum of the earth, and the worst part was that deep down, Izuku knew he had been acting unfairly. I was just so angry. It wasn't fair to him, but I wanted him to know I was angry. But whether Izuku knew he was being mean or not, it didn't matter, because the thing he hated most about his cat form, broccoli, well, it was much harder to control that part. Like, for example, if Izuku wanted to hug someone, he could often resist that urge. Barely, but could still hold it back. But if Broccoli wanted to hug, well then he hugged them. A lot. Consequences be damned. Same with other emotions. It's like all his self-control simply flies out the window when he's in his smaller feline form. Sometimes it didn't even feel like he was in control of himself anymore. Instead, he would just float around in the background, watching it all unfold as his cat self did whatever it wanted, and he had no way to stop it. I never wanted him to care, but I want them to love me. They should just leave me alone. I need to hide. I don't want them to leave. Just hide. Go away, go away, go away. His breathing was getting even more frantic and irregular. He couldn't draw in enough air and his lungs were starting to burn. Go away! His hands were clawing at his head, tugging at his hair while he gritted his teeth. Just go away! His mind was being too damn loud. Stop it! His ears were ringing, heart pounding, the world around him spinning, and it was all just too much. I can't stay. Need to hide. Can't be a bother. Don't run. Hide. I need to. Izuku's lungs drew in a desperate, sharp breath of air, and, like a thread snapping, his mind screeched to a halt. The ringing stopped and was replaced by a heavy static as his eyes widened for barely a second before his whole face relaxed and his eyes became distant and clouded. His hands slowly, oh so slowly, lowered to his sides to rest in the sand, while his body let out a deep and steady breath. All of the anxiety, all the guilt, self-hate, and panic, he still felt it all, but it also felt so far away now. Somewhere in the back of his clouded head, he could hear banging and screaming behind all of the static, like something was trying to tell him to get up, to move, and to run, but he paid it no mind. Instead, he just sat there, perfectly still like a doll, watching the world around him through unseeing eyes, his whole body tingling with static. And soon, he couldn't even remember why he had been so upset in the first place. This is the end of the panic attack. 1855. I'll try to remember that. Sorry. I'm gonna pause. Oh no. Sorry about that. About 20 minutes passed, and Shota and Toshi started to grow really worried for Midoriya. The kid had been gone for too long. But just when they were about to go look for him, they saw the kid walking back to them. His eyes were distant and red from crying, and he had obvious frozen tear streaks covering his cheeks. It was a heartbreaking sight. Before either of them could say anything, Midoriya was already walking past them. They watched on in shocked silence how the kid just silently moved towards one of the many garbage piles and started cleaning. He didn't even glance at them. Wait, Shota called out, heart aching when the boy, aside from stopping what he was doing, didn't react. Midoriya, are you okay? He asked, as gently as he could, only to berate himself for asking such a dumb question. Of course the kid isn't okay. All he got in response was a short nod before the boy moved again to continue cleaning. He was still not looking at them, and it seemed like his body was moving as if on autopilot. Toshi and him shared a worried look. What the hell do we do? It was about halfway through the shift that Toshi seemed to reach his breaking point. The normally energetic boy was moving through each task as an empty husk, his eyes dull and distant, and it was getting too painful to watch. They had to put a stop to this. With an obviously strained smile and a small clap of his hands, Toshi stepped forward. All right, good work, my boy. That's enough for today, he said, as cheerfully as he could while walking over to stand next to Midoriya. It didn't even seem like the kid even noticed they still had time left, and instead just nodded and moved to grab his things, preparing to leave. Before that, there was something else, Toshi said, laying a hand on the boy's shoulder and stopping Midoriya in his tracks. The kid simply turned to look at him, though. His expression didn't shift. Toshi didn't let the lack of response faze him, though, and instead he gave the kid's shoulder a squeeze and flashed him another smile. He then started leading Midoriya somewhere, walking away from the beach, while motioning for Shota to follow them. All Shota could do was grab Midoriya's bag and curiously walk after his husband, wondering what he was up to. The next thing Shota knew, they were all sitting inside a warm cafe together. Him and Toshi had been here a couple of times before. It was a secluded and small cafe close to the beach. And with it still being so early in the morning, there were hardly any customers there, giving the place a quiet and cozy atmosphere. Shoulda had to hand it to his husband. He really knew what the kid needed. At first, Midoriya hadn't even seemed aware of what was happening. He had just let himself be led over to one of the round booths and sat down, his mind being miles away. Shoda was no stranger to dissociation. As a pro hero, he often came across distressed people, after all, and it always hurt seeing it happen. But to see someone so young doing it, it honestly broke Shota's heart. He slowly sat down next to Midoriya, making sure not to get too close or startle him. Toshi had gone to get them some warm drinks, while Shota kept an eye on the kid. His husband soon returned with coffee for the two adults and hot cocoa, with extra marshmallow, for Midoriya. Shota took note of the extra glass of water for the boy and gave an approving nod. Toshi put the drinks down on the table and sat down opposite of Shota, so the kid was seated securely between them. When the kid didn't move, Shota gently guided Izuku's hands to wrap around the warm mug of hot chocolate, and when he let go, the kid had simply held them there, unresponsive. But the longer they sat there, with Shota quietly sipping on his coffee and Toshi filling the silence with chatter, talking about everything under the sky, Shota could see the kid was starting to come back to them. He noticed the small fingers twitching slightly and glanced over, a small slimmer of hope filling him when he saw a shine return to the boy's eyes. After a moment, Midoriya blinked and he saw him draw in a sharp, yet quiet breath. Those green eyes flickered for a moment, looking up at his surroundings, before quickly turning back down with a frown. And then, after some time passed, he saw the boy seemingly notice the now lukewarm chocolate and take a slow, hesitant sip of the drink, closing his eyes. Should have tried not to show any reaction, but internally he sighed with relief. And glancing over at his husband, he could see the man had noticed the boy coming back, too, a teary, relieved smile spreading along his face. For a while, they sat like that, Toshi now talking more excitedly and trying to bring Midoriya into the conversation. And eventually, it worked. It took a while, but Midoriya started talking again, and he soon became more and more animated. Toshi and Midoriya started discussing some new anime that Shota definitely didn't like watching. It was just that Toshi, and for some reason their cats, forced him to watch it. It was quite a huge relief seeing the kid being excited for something as silly as an anime. It was like once he started talking, there was no end to it. Like he had been wanting to talk about it, but had been holding it in, but had been holding it all in for a very long time. But then, mid sentence, Midoriya suddenly grew quiet again, and Shota watched him worriedly. I am really sorry for how I've been acting lately. and for running away earlier, uh, and for just and for being just an uh mess. You didn't deserve any of that, the kid stammered, keeping his eyes at the table. Oh, kid, Shota sighed sadly. Of course, Midoriya would feel guilty for upsetting them. It's okay, my boy. No need to apologize, Toshi reassured him. But do you mind telling us why you ran away like that? We were really worried about you, he continued, laying a hand on the boy's shoulder. Don't. Midoriya suddenly choked, flinching away from Toshi's hand as if burned. Midoriya? Shota asked, now really worried. No matter what, the kid would never shake off All Might. I'm sorry, just stop. The boy sobbed, eyes pressing closed tightly as he started trembling. Stop what? Worrying about me. I'm not. You, you are already doing so much for me, and I can't. Midoriya gritted out, sounding close to panicking while he clutched at his chest. Oh, Shota, again, felt a small piece of his heart break that day. Shota knew the kid's self-esteem and sense of self-worth was bad, but he had desperately hoped it hadn't quite reached this level. He's just a goddamn kid, damn it! He noticed Toshi reaching out for the boy again, and Shota gently grabbed his hand, shaking his head. Shota then took a deep breath and turned to look at Midoriya. You feel like you don't deserve it, he said softly. Midoriya tensed before he nodded stiffly, shrinking further into himself and hugging his arms. Even though Shota had expected it, the confirmation still hurt. Okay, that is not good. Definitely something we need to keep an eye on, and put him up for a meeting with Hound Dog as soon as school starts. Toshi uncertainly looked at Shota, as if asking what he should do, despite them both being pro-heroes. It was clear that the underground hero was more used to dealing with these types of situations. Shota just squeezed his husband's hand before turning his attention back to the kid. Midoriya, I want you to know that what you're feeling is valid, and those feelings are real. But they are also not true. Because you do deserve kindness. You deserve to have people who care about you, just as much as anyone else does. I'm really sorry if I overwhelmed you earlier. I didn't mean to scare you off. Midoriya just shook his head, clearly not believing him, and Shota didn't blame him. He knew how those parasitic thoughts would cling to you. It would take more than some half-assed pep talk to get through this. Don't. It was just the thought of someone. The kid stammered, ducking his head. It's okay. I get it. Trust me, I really do. The idea of someone actually giving a shit about you? Terrifying, he said, earning a surprised snort from Midoriya, which the boy quickly covered with a hand. Shota felt his lips tug at the sound of the kid laughing, and he continued. But, well, whether you like it or not, you're stuck with us, kiddo, so better get used to it. That again earned him a shocked laugh, which evolved into more crying. This was when Toshi decided to step in. Not exactly the words I would use, but Aizawa is correct, my boy. We both care about you deeply. We're not going anywhere, Toshi agreed gently. Those words only made the kid cry harder, his body shaking with sobs while he hugged his arms tighter, knuckles turning white from the grip on his arms. They were getting some weird looks from the staff, and Toshi tried waving off their concerned glances, stating that everything was fine. Not really knowing what to do, Shota hesitantly reached out a hand to lay it on Midoriya's head, comfortingly petting those unruly curls. They were surprisingly soft, kind of familiar, somehow. To be honest, Shota had fully expected Midoriya to flinch away from the contact. But to his surprise, the kid just threw himself forward and latched onto Shota, hugging him tightly while he cried against his chest. Shota stiffened and looked over at Toshi with wide eyes. What the fuck do I do? But Toshi, that traitor, just raised his phone and snapped a picture of the whole thing, grinning like an idiot with eyes shining from unshed tears. With a glare at his partner, Shota forced himself to relax, and he hesitantly hugged Midoriya back, trying to calm the crying teen. It took a while, and they got a few more odd looks from the staff, but eventually Midoriya calmed down. Sorry, Midoriya sniffled, leaning back and looking embarrassed. Toshi handed him some tissues, which he accepted gratefully. It's okay, Shota sighed. His uniform was now drenched with tears. How was it even possible to cry that much? Beside them, Toshi cleared his throat, gaining their attention. Midoriya, my boy, I want you to answer this honestly. What happened today? Has it happened before? And how often? Toshi asked, looking at the boy in concern. Midoriya turned away and ducked his head, almost as if in shame. Sometimes, yeah, e- especially before middle school, but it's gotten better. It doesn't happen so often anymore, he muttered, bringing his hands up to his chest and fiddling with them. It used to happen often? Shada asked, not liking how young the kid had apparently been when they first started. The boy nodded but didn't say anything else. Deciding to let it go for now, Shota sighed. Okay, just one more question. Are you safe? He asked, giving a pause. We know you don't like talking about your home or school life, but if you're not safe, then we can help. But to Shota and Toshi's utter dismay, the boy was quick to shut that down. I'm safe, he said quickly. But then he smiled a little, looking down at his hands and wringing them together in his lap. Really, I I live in a very happy home. I couldn't have asked for a better family, he said softly, voice filled with so much honesty and warmth. And you won't tell us anything more? Shota pressed, not really believing him based on what they knew regarding the boy's eating habits and state of clothes. Like always, Midoriya pressed his lips together and shook his head, stubbornly keeping quiet. So, with a sigh, Shota dropped it. All right then. So what are you gonna do now? He asked, glancing at the clock. It was way later than when they would usually end their training. I, Midoriya began, trailing off as he looked away. I, I still want to meet with Nezu, the boy mumbled, keeping his face down and wringing his hands nervously. But I don't think I want to take those lessons yet, he whispered, sounding almost afraid. As much as Shota would have loved to hear those words earlier this week, now they just filled him with guilt and regret. He might have gone too far and scared the kid too much. Because of me? He asked, trying to sound calm despite the lump forming in his throat. Without hesitation, the boy shook his head. No, because of me, he answered quietly. Just. I don't think I want that right now. Not until UA, if I even get in, at least. But maybe I can still meet him and just discuss analysis or play chess or something. I really like spending time with him, Midoriya asked carefully, looking up at Shota almost pleadingly. Toshi and him glanced at each other before Shota turned back to Midoriya. I'm sure he'd be fine with that. Why don't we accompany you to UA so you can talk to him? The relieved smile Midoriya gave him was almost blinding. Thanks, Aizawa-sensei. Unsurprisingly, Nezu was a bit disappointed at having to delay the real lessons. But to Shota's relief, he seemed happy to just have Midoriya visit him again. Well, if that's what you want, Midoriya, then I don't mind putting aside my lesson plan for now. Though, now that you are all here, I want to show you something. It might give you all a better understanding of my choice of student. With that, Nezu pulled out a small folder and laid out some papers. Remember the tests I had you do last time you were here, Midoriya? He asked, glancing at the boy. Midoriya nodded, recognition lightening in his eyes. Truth be told, they were quite basic IQ tests, and although they are not nearly enough to gain an accurate score, I can, with confidence, say that your results are well above average. I might even be so bold to say as your score is that of a natural genius, Nezu stated cheerfully, patting the papers with a paw excitedly. Midoriya's face turned bright red, having apparently not expected that amount of praise having apparently not expected that amount of praise. Beside him, Toshi laughed loudly and patted the boy's back, looking way too proud considering he had contributed nothing to the boy's intellect. So you can probably understand why I want you as my student. though I will try to keep your human fragility in mind, and we will wait until you are comfortable. Shoda had to resist the urge to roll his eyes at that comment. He had not missed the way Nezu's eyes had traveled to him when he said that. Human fragility, my ass. I assume you want to take the normal exam like everyone else, Nezu continued. But rest assured, even if you only get into general studies, which I have no doubt that you will, this spot as my student will always be open for you when you are ready. Midoriya looked like he was at a loss of words and just stared at Nezu, mouth agape. Thank you, Nezu-sensei, he stammered, giving a low bow and blushing furiously. The mammal just chuckled and patted the boy's head with a paw. Shota felt some of his worry leave at the interaction, lips twitching up in an almost smile. Perhaps things will work out after all. Toshi and Midoriya started looking at the tests, Toshi asking about some of the questions while gushing about how smart the kid was, all while Midoriya looked torn between dying from embarrassment and relishing in the praise. Seeing his opportunity, Shota met the eyes of Nezu and gestured to the door. His old mentor immediately understood and they carefully sneaked out. As soon as they were out of earshot, Shota turned to Nezu with a scowl. Absolutely no Code Red scenario analyzing until the start of UA. Preferably his second or even third year, or after being cleared by Hound Dog, Shota said firmly, voice leaving no room for argument. Of course, Nezu answered cheerfully, seemingly unaware of the turmoil he could cause, and eyes looking like they were already planning every way he could mold the kid into his perfect, terrifying pupil. Nezu, I'm serious. I know you have a hard time understanding humans, but the kid already has a lot to deal with, and he doesn't need any more baggage. Now, Aizawa, do you really think so lowly of me? I admit I might have taken things a bit far in the past, but you have my word that I won't bring those tests into the lesson until I am sure he's ready. I also agree with having him meet Hound Dog. I will speak with him and see that he has time for Midoriya as soon as school starts. Feeling like a weight was released from his shoulders, Shota nodded. Good. Thank you, Nezu, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. He glanced at Nezu, considering him. Also, if you could try getting him to open up more about his home life. The kid won't say a thing to me or Toshi, but maybe you'll have more luck, Shota said carefully. As much as it pained him, they really were at a standstill. Shota knew something was definitely wrong, especially after the kid's episode earlier today. But with every worry claim coming back blank, unless Midoriya spoke up or asked for help, there wasn't much they could legally do. Damn Toshi and his morals and his kidnapping is wrong Shota mentality. Things would have been much easier if I got to do it my way. Nezu nodded, his smile widening slightly. I can certainly try and talk to him about it. Thanks. It's no problem. I understand you're just looking out for your son, Nezu said cheerfully, his eyes twinkling with amusement. He's not my... Shota started, but at the pointed look Nezu gave him, he clicked his mouth shut and sighed. Just keep an eye on him, Shota muttered, ducking his face in his capture weapon. Always, Nezu answered with a smile, a weird look in his eyes. I can't believe I'm about to do this. Aizawa Shota, pro-hero Eraserhead, was currently facing his worst opponent yet. Namely, a small kitten named Broccoli, whom he was having a stare-down with. For the past 5 minutes, Broccoli and Shota had been seated on the floor opposite of each other, neither of them moving or saying anything. Toshi was watching them from the couch, a small grin on his face while Slushy was lazily lounging on his lap. Come on, Sho, Toshi encouragingly said, trying and failing to keep his amusement out of his voice. Shota shot him a glare. You're just loving this, aren't you? With an annoyed sigh, Shota glanced back down at the small green fluff of fury. Emerald eyes were watching his every move, waiting. Deciding to just get it over with, Shota bowed his head slightly. I'm sorry for insulting your friend. I've spoken to Nezu and it's all sorted out now, so can you please stop being mad? He felt ridiculous. Even though Broccoli clearly had an intelligence quirk, this was just humiliating. Thank God Shoda had the foresight to confiscate Toshi's phone before he decided to do this. His partner looked like he really wanted to record the whole damn thing. Another moment of silence, but then he heard the soft pitter patter of small paws against the floor, and when he looked up, Broccoli was seated right in front of him. The cat almost looked guilty, or well, as guilty as he could look. The next thing Shota knew, Broccoli had flung himself at him, seating himself on his lap and bumping his head against Shota's chest lovingly, letting out a loud purr in the process. Shota felt his face break into a huge, relieved smile, and he reached down to pet the kitten. I take it that means I'm forgiven? He chuckled. The answer he got was yet another buff against his chest and an even louder purr. They were soon joined by Slushy, who had decided to join in on the cuddles. She almost stepped over Broccoli in her hurry to climb up on Shoto's shoulder. Oh, so now you decide to forgive me too? Nice to see who is your favorite here, he grumbled, stroking Slushy under her chin. Toshi let out a laugh at that, while the two cat brats just purred louder, seemingly happy cuddling with him again. Bonus. Okay, Izuku, you can do this. You might have made up with Aizawa-sensei earlier today, but that doesn't mean that Broccoli can just magically make up with him too. You need to play it cool. Wait for him to say something. Anything. Just don't hug him yet. Broccoli sat at the floor, almost vibrating in excitement when Shota came home and sat down in front of him. Here we go. Any minute now. Any minute now. Oh my god, Shota, please just say something. Why are you like this? Needless to say, once Broccoli was cleared to cuddle with his dad again, he did not let him go. Neither of his dads seemed to mind when Broccoli and Slushy stayed with them for the night. Broccoli curled up on top of Shota's chest and purred loudly. Izuku meant every word he had said that day. He couldn't have asked for a better family. Now he just needed to get into UA and everything would be okay. Right? Author's notes. Well, there we go. It was supposed to only be comfort with a small amount of hurt, but ended up being mostly hurt. But I hope you liked it. I was really super nervous about posting this because I tried to write how I feel while dissociating, but it is no way how it is for everyone. If you want to learn more about dissociative disorders, then I highly recommend reading up on it because they are very misunderstood diagnoses. College is unfortunately still taking up most of my time, and I'm not sure when the next chapter will be up, but I will try my best to update as soon as I can. And for those reading my other stories, don't worry. I'm not planning on dropping them and are working on them too. They are just taking a bit longer. Hope you are all doing well and have a wonderful day. Take care, everyone. And that is chapter 6. I'm sorry for that little fumble after the panic attack thing. I was just trying to remember where the timestamp was so I could write it down so in the video I could like put up a time card to skip to. Um I don't really have much else to say. It was a good chapter. I liked it a lot. I hope you all liked it a lot. Show the author some love. Links in the description. And I'll see you next time. Bye, pups!